The city was a creature of two faces. By day, it was all gleaming glass and bustling streets, a place of ordinary people with ordinary dreams. But when the sun dipped below the skyline, a different world awoke. This was the City of Shadows, a place ruled by whispers, fear, and the silent, brutal laws of power. And in this world, one name was spoken with a hushed and terrified respect: Luciano DeLuca. On the other side of this great divide, in a small apartment that always smelled faintly of disinfectant and old books, lived a girl named Arden Vale. Her world was defined by the four walls of her home and the relentless pressure of her studies. She was a final-year medical student, her mind filled with anatomy charts and chemical formulas, her heart weighed down by a heavy, secret burden. Her mother, the only family she had left, was slowly fading away in a hospital bed, and the mountain of medical bills grew taller with every passing week. Arden's dreams of becoming a doctor were being crushed by the cruel cost of keeping her mother alive. It was this desperation that led her into the shadows. Under the cover of night, she became a ghost, a rumor. She was the person you called when you had a wound that couldn't be explained to a real doctor. She patched up knife fights, stitched up bullet grazes, and set broken bones for men who lived outside the law. They paid her in cash, always too much, and she asked no questions. The money, tucked into an old cookie tin, was her mother's lifeline. Her best friend, Mina Cruz, knew about this secret life. She was the only one. Tonight, as Arden packed a small, discreet bag with bandages, sutures, and painkillers, Mina stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly. "Arden, please," Mina pleaded, her voice tight with worry. "Don't go. This is too dangerous. One of these nights, you're going to walk into a room and patch up the wrong man. And he won't just pay you and let you go. He'll pull you into his world, and you'll never get out." Arden paused, her hand resting on a roll of gauze. She knew Mina was right. But the memory of the latest hospital bill, a stark white envelope on her kitchen table, flashed in her mind. "I have to, Mina," she whispered, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "It's for my mom. I don't have a choice." What Arden didn't know was that her choice was about to collide with fate. Across the city, in a world of polished black cars and tailored suits, Luciano DeLuca was stepping into a trap. He was the king of this underworld, a man who had rebuilt his family's empire from nothing after his own uncle had betrayed them, murdering his parents and leaving a 15-year-old Luciano for dead in the ashes. That boy had died in that fire, and the man who rose was made of stone and vengeance. He now led a group known as the Revenants, ghosts returned from the grave to claim what was theirs. He trusted no one, showed no weakness, and felt no softness. His heart was a fortress, and his eyes were as cold as a winter grave. His most loyal soldier, a man named Rico, drove him to a meeting that night. It was supposed to be a peaceful talk with a potential new ally. But the moment their car stopped, the night exploded into violence. It was an ambush. Men with guns poured out of the darkness, their faces hidden, their intentions clear. Luciano's men fought back with a fierce loyalty, but a stray bullet, lucky and cruel, found its mark. It tore through Luciano's side, a searing hot pain that stole his breath. For the first time in years, the devil bled. Rico, fighting like a wild animal, managed to get his bleeding boss into a car and sped away from the chaos. Luciano was pale, his jaw clenched against the pain, his hand pressed against the dark stain spreading across his expensive white shirt. They couldn't go to a hospital, it would be the first place their enemies would look. Rico's mind raced, panic clawing at his throat. Then he remembered a name, a whisper in the underworld. A girl. A medical student who fixed problems and disappeared without a trace. He made the call. When Arden's secret phone buzzed with an address she didn't recognize, a chill went down her spine. The voice on the other end was rough, desperate. She took a deep breath, told Mina she would be back soon, and stepped out into the cold night air. The address led her to a part of the city that tourists never saw. An old, abandoned warehouse stood silent and imposing. Rico was waiting for her, his face grim, his eyes scanning the darkness. He led her inside to a small, dimly lit office space. And there, on a makeshift bed of old crates covered with a jacket, lay Luciano DeLuca. The air left Arden's lungs. This was not just another wounded gangster. She had heard the stories, the fearful whispers of the man they called the devil. He was taller than she imagined, his body all hard muscle and coiled strength even in his weakened state. His face was all sharp angles and a strong jaw, now tight with pain. His dark hair was damp with sweat, and his eyes were open, watching her. They were the color of dark storm clouds, and they held a depth of danger and intelligence that made her heart hammer against her ribs. She knelt beside him, her medical training taking over, pushing her fear aside. Her hands were steady as she cut away his shirt to reveal the wound. It was deep and ugly. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice a low, gravelly sound that seemed to vibrate through the concrete floor. It was a voice used to giving commands, a voice that promised consequences. Arden didn't look up from her work, her fingers gently probing the area. "And yet," she said, her own voice surprisingly calm, "you're still alive because I am." She worked quickly, cleaning the wound, preparing a needle to suture it shut. Her touch was clinical, professional, but it was also gentle. It was a touch Luciano couldn't remember ever feeling. Not from his ruthless father, not from his treacherous uncle. It was a touch meant to heal, not to hurt. As she worked, he watched her. He saw the concentration in her eyes, the way she bit her lip in focus. He saw that she wasn't afraid of him, not in this moment. She was in her element, and she was saving his life. When the last stitch was in place and the bandage was secured, a strange silence fell over the room. The job was done. Arden began to pack her things, her movements hurried. She needed to get out of there, to go back to her normal world. But as she stood to leave, Luciano's hand shot out, his fingers wrapping around her wrist. His grip was like iron, but it wasn't cruel. It was possessive. Her skin was warm and soft under his rough, calloused fingers. "No one," he said, his stormy eyes locking with hers, "can know you were here. Do you understand?" The threat in his voice was clear, but there was something else underneath, a flicker of something that might have been concern. He nodded to Rico. "Take her home. Watch her. Make sure she's safe." The car ride home was a blur. Arden sat in the back seat, staring out the window at the passing lights, her wrist still tingling where he had held her. She felt like she had just touched a lightning storm. She had walked into the lion's den and patched him up, and now she had the lion's attention. The next evening, there was a firm knock on her apartment door. It was Rico. He didn't say a word, simply handed her a heavy, plain paper bag. When she looked inside, her knees felt weak. It was filled with stacks of money, more than she had ever seen in her life. Then he gave her a second item, a sleek, black phone. "This is a direct line," Rico explained, his tone serious. "Only the boss has this number. Don't call anyone else on it. He will contact you." Then he turned and left, disappearing back into the shadows from which he came. Arden stood alone in her quiet apartment, holding the phone. It felt cold and heavy in her hand, a tangible link to the man from the warehouse. It was a contract she had never meant to sign, written not on paper, but in blood and a single, piercing look from a pair of stormy eyes. Her simple, desperate life was over. The story of the devil and the girl who saved him had just begun, and neither of them knew yet that his wound was the first stitch in a bond that would tie them together forever. The days that followed the night in the warehouse passed for Arden in a strange, hazy blur. The ordinary rhythm of her life, the lectures, the library study sessions, the visits to her mother's quiet hospital room, felt like a performance, a part she was acting out while her mind remained trapped elsewhere. It was stuck in that dimly lit room, kneeling on a cold concrete floor, with the weight of a powerful man's gaze fixed upon her. The heavy bag of money was hidden away, a secret fortune that solved one problem while creating 1,000 more. But it was the other object he had given her that truly held her captive. The black phone sat silent on her nightstand, an obsidian slab of promised danger. Every time she looked at it, her stomach would flutter with a nervous, thrilling anticipation that was entirely new to her. She was waiting. She just didn't know for what. Across the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the entire glittering metropolis like a king surveying his kingdom, Luciano DeLuca was also finding his focus fractured. The pain in his side was a dull, persistent throb, a physical reminder of his own mortality and the betrayal that had almost cost him everything. But it was a different kind of ache, a restless irritation in his mind, that truly plagued him. His strategist, Dante Moetti, would lay out intricate plans for retaliation against the ambush, and Luciano would find his thoughts drifting not to maps and enemy movements, but to a pair of steady, capable hands and a voice that had been calm in the face of his own storm. He was a man who commanded armies of shadows, who decided fates with a single word, and he was being haunted by the memory of a girl who hadn't even flinched. It was an unacceptable distraction, a weakness he could not afford. And so, he decided to eliminate it the only way he knew how, by confronting it, by pulling it into his light and examining it until he understood its power over him. The call came on a rainy Tuesday evening. The black phone vibrated against the wooden nightstand with an intensity that made Arden jump. She picked it up, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Hello?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. There was a pause on the other end, a silence so deep she could almost feel the weight of it. Then his voice came through, that low, gravelly sound that seemed to travel straight down her spine. "The wound," Luciano stated, "no greeting, no pleasantries. It needs to be checked." He gave her an address, one in the most exclusive, guarded neighborhood in the city, and instructed her to be ready in 10 minutes. The line went dead. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. A sleek, black car with tinted windows was waiting for her exactly 10 minutes later. The drive was silent, the driver a grim-faced man who didn't speak a word. They passed through towering, ornate gates and up a long, winding driveway that led to a modern fortress of glass and steel. It was breathtaking and intimidating all at once. Rico was waiting at the massive front door, his expression as unreadable as ever. He led her through the entrance into a vast, minimalist living space. The floors were polished darkwood, the furniture was low and sleek, and one entire wall was glass, offering a panoramic, dizzying view of the city lights shimmering through the rain. It was a home that spoke of immense power and immense loneliness. Luciano was standing by that window, his back to her, a silhouette against the glittering urban tapestry. He turned slowly as she entered. He was dressed simply in dark trousers and a white shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, and he looked even more imposing than he had on the floor of the warehouse. In his own domain, he was utterly in command. "Come," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the spacious room. He led her to a large leather sofa and sat down, his movements fluid and controlled. Without a word, he began to unbutton his shirt. Arden's breath hitched. This felt different from the desperate, clinical work in the warehouse. This was deliberate, intimate. She approached him, her medical bag feeling small and insignificant in her hands. She knelt on the plush rug before him, the way she had on the cold concrete, but the context was entirely different. The air between them was thick and charged. She carefully peeled back the bandage. Her fingers, so steady before, trembled slightly as they brushed against the warm, hard plane of his stomach. The sutures were clean, the healing was progressing well, but the sight of the angry red mark on his skin, a permanent scar she had given him, sent a strange, possessive thrill through her. She worked in silence, cleaning the area, applying a fresh antiseptic, her focus entirely on the task to avoid meeting his eyes. But she could feel his gaze on the top of her head, heavy and intense. "Why do you do it?" he finally asked, his voice quiet. "Risk your future, your safety, for men like me." Arden finished taping down the new bandage but didn't pull away. The proximity was overwhelming. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap and something else, something uniquely him, dark and wild. She told him about her mother. She spoke of the illness that was a slow, quiet thief, stealing her mother's memories and her own financial security. She spoke of the hospital bills that were like a tide slowly drowning her, and the scholarship that wasn't enough. She didn't look at him as she spoke, her eyes fixed on the button of his shirt. When she finished, there was another long silence. He didn't offer pity. He didn't offer more money. Instead, he said, "Stay." It was another command, but softer this time. "Have dinner with me." It was the last thing Arden expected. She should have said no. She should have packed her bag, taken the car home, and tried to forget the storm in his eyes. But the word yes was out of her mouth before she could stop it. Dinner was not in a grand dining hall, but at a small table set near the colossal window. The food was simple, exquisite Italian cuisine brought in by a silent member of his staff. And they talked. He asked her about medical school, about her dreams, and he actually listened to her answers. And slowly, carefully, he offered her pieces of his own past. Not the brutal details of his reign, but the tragedy that started it. He spoke of a happy childhood that felt like a dream belonging to someone else. He spoke of his parents, not as mafia lords, but as a mother who loved to garden and a father who told him grand stories. He spoke of the fire, the betrayal, the feeling of being 15 and utterly alone in the world, left to die in the ashes of everything he loved. As he spoke, the fearsome mafia king began to fade, and in his place, Arden saw the wounded, furious boy he had once been. The boy who had to become a monster to survive. Her heart, the heart of a healer, ached for him. She saw the scars on the inside, far deeper and more painful than the one on his side, and an impossible desire to heal those, too, began to bloom within her. Later, as Rico drove her home, the city seemed different. The lights were brighter, the shadows less frightening. She felt a connection to Luciano that was terrifying and exhilarating. He was no longer just the devil, he was a man, a complex and wounded man who had let her see a crack in his armor. The next day, she met Mina for coffee. The moment Arden walked in, Mina's face fell. "You saw him again," she accused, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "I can see it all over your face, Arden. This isn't a game. He is a killer. He deals in violence and pain. He will drag you down into his darkness, and you will never be the same. He will break your heart, or worse, get you killed." The words were a cold splash of reality, and Arden felt a shiver of doubt. Mina was only trying to protect her. But the universe, it seemed, was determined to pull Arden deeper. Luciano's enemies, the ones who had ambushed him, were not idle. They were hunting. They had heard whispers of a mysterious doctor who had saved the devil when he should have died. They knew finding this person was the key to uncovering a vulnerability in the seemingly invincible Luciano DeLuca. Their spies began to quietly ask questions in the city's underworld, their search a silent, spreading poison. Luciano discovered this through his own network of informants the very same day. A cold, ruthless fury descended upon him. The thought of Arden, his Arden, being hunted, being in danger because of him, ignited a protective instinct so fierce it shocked him. He didn't call. He didn't send Rico. He went himself. He found her in her small apartment, studying at her kitchen table. The sight of her in her safe, simple world, so innocent and unaware of the danger circling her, made his chest tighten. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Luciano? What's wrong?" He stepped inside, filling the small space with his presence. "They're looking for you," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The men who shot me. They've heard about a doctor. They're asking questions." The color drained from Arden's face. Mina's warning echoed in her mind. This was the reality of his world. It had found her. She backed away, fear finally taking hold. "What does that mean?" she whispered. He followed her, his gaze intense, unwavering. "It means you're not safe here anymore. Because of me." He reached out, not to grab her wrist, but to gently cup her face. His thumb stroked her cheek, a gesture so tender it was at odds with everything she knew about him. "I will never let anything happen to you. Do you understand me? Never." In that moment, standing in her humble kitchen, with the storm of his world crashing down upon her, every warning, every logical thought, evaporated. The fear was still there, but it was drowned out by a stronger, more powerful emotion. She looked up into his stormy eyes, seeing the fear in them, fear for ***, and her heart shattered and rebuilt itself all at once. She rose onto her toes, her hands coming to rest on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. And then she closed the small distance between them and pressed her lips to his. It was not a gentle, questioning kiss. It was a collision. It was fire and desperation, a silent confession of everything that had been building between them since the moment their eyes met in the warehouse. It was the taste of danger and the promise of safety, all tangled together. Luciano's arms wrapped around her, pulling her tightly against him, his response immediate and possessive, as if he were claiming a part of himself he hadn't known was missing. It was the wrongest and most right thing Arden had ever done. And in that kiss, the last wall around Luciano's heart crumbled to dust. She had pulled him back from the brink of death, and now, she was pulling him back toward life. The world did not simply shift after the kiss, it was remade. For Arden, the four walls of her small apartment, once her entire universe, now felt like a faded photograph of a life that no longer fit. The ghost of Luciano's touch, the searing memory of his lips on hers, lingered on her skin and in the very air she breathed. The warnings from Mina, which had once sounded so rational and urgent, now seemed to come from a distant, muffled place. She had crossed a line from which there was no return, and the strange, terrifying truth was that she did not want to go back. She had tasted the storm, and now her quiet world felt suffocating. For Luciano, the change was even more profound. The kiss in Arden's kitchen had been a seismic event in the frozen tundra of his soul. It had cracked open something he had long believed sealed shut forever, his capacity to feel something other than anger, vengeance, or cold calculation. The relentless, driving need for revenge that had been the engine of his life for over a decade was now sharing space with a new, foreign, and terrifyingly fragile need. The need to protect, to cherish, to possess in a way that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with the heart. He had spent his life building walls, and this woman, with her gentle hands and fearless eyes, had walked straight through them as if they were made of smoke. He did not wait. The very next day, he came for her. This time, there was no discussion, no request. The danger was real, a tangible threat slithering through the underworld, and he would not gamble with her safety. He stood in her living room, a king in a pauper's chamber, and made his declaration. You cannot stay here. Neither can your mother. It is not safe. When Arden began to protest, to speak of her studies, her life, he silenced her not with a command, but with a look of such raw, undisguised fear that it stole the breath from her lungs. He was not being controlling, he was being desperate. Please, he said, and the word, so foreign on his tongue, was more powerful than any order. Let me do this. Let me keep you safe. And so, Arden made a choice. She packed a single bag, her hands trembling not with fear, but with the dizzying certainty that she was stepping off a cliff. Luciano's men, under Rico's meticulous direction, arranged for her mother's immediate and discreet transfer to a private, state-of-the-art long-term care facility, a place that looked more like a luxurious hotel than a hospital, where she would receive round-the-clock care far beyond anything Arden could have ever provided. The crushing weight of the medical bills, the constant, gnawing anxiety that had been her companion for years, was lifted. Luciano had not just offered her safety, he had given her freedom. The new apartment he provided for her was not the cold, modern fortress he inhabited. It was a sunlit, spacious home in a secure building, warm and inviting, with bookshelves and a view of a park. It was a place meant for a life, not just for survival. Rico was a constant, grim-faced guardian stationed outside her door, a living reminder of the world she was now tethered to. At first, Arden felt like a bird in a gilded cage, beautiful but confined. But Luciano was determined to prove her wrong. He began to share his world with her, piece by piece. He explained the structure of the revenants, not the brutal details, but the code of loyalty they lived by. He introduced her properly to Dante, his sharp-minded strategist, who regarded her with a respectful, calculating curiosity. She saw the way his men looked at him, not just with fear, but with a fierce, unwavering devotion. She began to understand that the man they were loyal to was not just the monster of legend, but a leader, a protector of his own. She was slowly, irrevocably, falling in love with the man behind the myth. Weeks melted into a new kind of normal. Luciano would spend evenings with her, away from the violence and the deals. They would talk for hours, and in those quiet moments, the Mafia king would vanish, replaced by just Luciano, a man who was rediscovering how to laugh, how to simply be. Arden saw the shadows behind his eyes begin to lighten. She was healing the wounds no one else could see, and with every smile she drew from him, she felt her own heart become more entwined with his. But the outside world had not stood still. Silas, Luciano's treacherous uncle, the architect of his parents' murder, had not been idle. The whispers of Luciano's weakness, of a mysterious woman, had reached him. A man of pure venom and cunning, Silas saw not a threat in Arden, but an opportunity. Luciano had always been a fortress with no gates, but now, he had a heart. And a heart could be broken, captured, and used against him. Silas began to weave his web, patiently, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came on a night when Arden, feeling a need for a piece of her old life, decided to visit her mother at the new facility. She assured Rico it was a short, simple trip, that she would be safe in the car he drove. But Silas's men had been watching, learning her patterns. They did not attack the heavily armored car. Instead, they created a distraction, a fake traffic accident that blocked the main route, forcing Rico to take a detour down a quieter, dimly lit industrial street. It was there, in that calculated silence, that the trap was sprung. Two vans screeched out of an alley, boxing Rico's car in. Men with covered faces and cold eyes swarmed the vehicle. Rico fought like a demon, his loyalty a physical force. He took down two men before a crack to the head with a gun but sent him slumping against the steering wheel, dazed. Arden's scream was cut short as a rough hand covered her mouth and she was dragged, kicking and fighting, from the car. The world became a blur of fear and violent motion. She was being pulled toward one of the vans, her heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. This was it. This was the darkness Mina had warned her about. It was real, and it was swallowing her whole. At that exact moment, another car, a black sedan moving with the speed and force of a predator, T-boned the van meant to take her. The sound of screeching metal and shattering glass filled the air. Before the kidnappers could even process what had happened, the passenger door of the sedan flew open. Luciano DeLuca emerged. But this was not the man Arden knew. This was the devil himself, unleashed. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, his eyes burning with a promise of annihilation. He moved with a terrifying, preternatural speed, a force of nature made of vengeance and wrath. He did not fire a gun, this was too personal. He used his hands, his strength, a brutal and efficient violence that was horrifying and beautiful to behold. He was not just fighting, he was erasing. He was a storm of retribution, and every blow was for her. He reached her just as one of the men tried to pull her into the van. Luciano's hand closed around the man's throat, throwing him aside as if he were weightless. He pulled Arden into his arms, his body a shield between her and the chaos. He held her so tightly she could feel the frantic, wild beating of his heart against her own. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair, his voice a ragged, desperate thing. "I've got you. I'm here." In that moment, clinging to him amidst the wreckage and the violence, Arden was not afraid. She was safe. He was her sanctuary. In the aftermath, as his other men secured the scene and saw to a groggy Rico, Luciano took Arden home, to his home, the penthouse. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a profound, shaking quiet. He led her to the center of the vast, dark room, the city light sprawling beneath them like a field of fallen stars. He took both of her hands in his own still trembling slightly from the fury. He looked down at her, his expression stripped bare of all its armor. There was only raw, terrifying vulnerability. "Arden," he began, his voice low and thick with emotion. "For years, my heart has had only one purpose: revenge. It was a cold, dead thing. I thought that was all I was. I thought that was all I would ever be." He brought one of her hands to his chest, pressing her palm flat over the scar she had stitched, over the heart that beat for her. "But you walked into my darkness and you offered me light. You saw the man buried under the monster, and you weren't afraid. You healed me. Not just this," he said, gesturing to the wound, "but me." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "I love you. You are the only good, pure thing in my cursed life. You are the only thing I have ever truly wanted to protect, to keep." Tears streamed down Arden's face, not of sadness, but of overwhelming love. She saw the truth in his eyes, the boy who had lost everything, the man who had become a king of shadows, and the person who had chosen to love her against all odds. She reached up and cupped his face, her touch as gentle as it had been that first night. "I love you, Luciano," she said, her voice clear and sure. "Not the devil, not the Mafia king. You. And I am not afraid." He pulled her into a kiss then, a kiss that was nothing like the first. It was not a collision of fire and desperation, but a slow, deep, claiming promise. It was a vow. It was a new beginning, written in the language of a love that was stronger than blood, more powerful than vengeance. Their two different worlds had not just collided, they had fused, creating a new, unbreakable whole. The contract had been signed in blood, tested by fire, and sealed with a love that would defy every shadow, forever. Their story is far from over. To follow Arden and Luciano's journey through the dangers and passions that still await them, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next.